In this series of videos that I'm making on how to understand the Gita Govinda by Jayadeva, what I mean by it is that how I understand the Gita Govinda, or how it can be understood. This is not an academic work. This is from my background in English literature, that we can understand certain things as poems, how we understand them personally, based on certain criteria of literature. And this is in the hopes also that people will be able to be more interested in this topic and create more academic works, more non-fiction works that are more easily available at bookstores. If this, hopefully, if this topic becomes more interesting, I hope that it does, because there's a lot of good to be found in Indian literature. Right now, it's sort of a niche interest in some people, but I hope with our contributions that there is a more keen interest, a more revived interest in Sanskrit works in Indian literature, because they do have a lot to offer us. How can we understand the Gita Govinda? The general classification is that it's a work of poetry. It has structure. And we can go into these details as I break down chapter by chapter. And by no means this is some sort of authoritative work that only this is the right interpretation. It's just meant to arouse an interest in the subject and see the beauty of it, and maybe implement some of its wisdom in our daily life. So how to understand the Gita Govinda by Jayadeva? Even if we're not familiar with Sanskrit or Hinduism, we could have a good understanding of how it works as a poem or as a work of literature. It's lyric poetry, so it expresses emotions usually in the first person, usually accompanied by music. It's called a Kavya, the style. It's a literary style that's it's part poetry, part prose. It has 12 chapters, each telling part of a story. Each chapter has its own raga. Raga is a structure of melody, a type of musical style. The aesthetics of Indian poetry is to dwell in Rasa or Ras. It means taste. It's fundamental to the Indian understanding of aesthetics. So to dwell in a prolonged emotional state. In this particular work, the main taste is love or romance, but there's also fury, aversion, and amazement. The subject is Radha being offended at Krishna's forgetfulness of her presence. She goes through emotions ranging from doubt, anger, and of course yearning. She yearns for him, he's absent. In terms of ideas, the main idea comes from Vaishnavism, which is to say that the worship of Vishnu as the central deity is most fundamental here, most present. Specifically, it's Gaudiya Vaishnavism, where Krishna is not only the incarnation of Vishnu, but he is the main deity. Vishnu and Krishna are identical. There is an allegorical component here to this poem, and it stems from the idea that Jayadeva plants early on in the poem, that Krishna incarnates himself into creation to rescue mankind. So if he did that in the past, why doesn't he incarnate himself now? Where is he now in our time of need? So the way Jayadeva structures this poem is that Krishna is found in our lives. He is yearning itself, yearning for what is loved, that connection, that emotional anticipation. That's where you find the presence of the divine. So to yearn is to worship. He also rescues us from our anger, which is personified here with Radha being upset at Krishna. And so now we could look at each chapter and see how to understand this poem piece by piece, just like reading any other piece of word literature.